Does waking up to catch the sunrise flight into remote Cape York community sound appealing? Hayden Bonacorsi's psychology career with the Royal Flying Doctors Service lets him do just that, proving there's nothing ordinary about applying psychology skills where they're needed most. Professionally Psyched is the podcast that brings you cutting-edge psychology research and real-world insights from our psych community of clinicians, researchers, and educators alike. In our special alumni spotlights, we chat to graduates from our psychology degree programs about how their skills learned in the classroom have become powerful tools supporting diverse career journeys and successes. Hi everyone and welcome to Professionally Psyched. I'm Jessica Muller, PhD candidate in Public Health at James Cook University, and before we get started we'd like to acknowledge the custodians of the land on which we record, and for me today that's the Bindal and Wulgurukaba peoples. And I pay my respects to elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and cultures from wherever you may be tuning in from across the country. In this Alumni Spotlight episode, Dr. Amanda Krause speaks with Hayden Bonacorsi about bringing mental health services to Australia's most remote communities. From his unexpected journey into psychology to applying neuroscience concepts in EMDR therapy, Hayden reveals how JCU's teachings on neuroplasticity and critical thinking shape his approach to destigmatizing mental health. So grab your headphones and get ready to get professionally psyched about taking psychology skills to the skies and embracing lifelong learning with an open, curious mindset. Enjoy.
Hayden, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. To start, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Hayden. I'm a psychologist currently employed with the Royal Flying Doctors Service, and we go out to Cape York communities, as far as the tip of Australia near Bamaga and surrounding communities. However, I work predominantly in the Cooktown and Weipa clusters associated with that. And yes, I'm also at JCU LMI. So I did my studies at James Cook University in Cairns back in 2015 to 2018.
Was the Royal Flying Doctor Service what you set out to be a part of, or how did you go from graduation to where you are now in that position?
To be honest, it was always something I had thought about, but it wasn't necessarily the end goal or one of the goals from the beginning. It's something that developed over time, and that's also how my journey into psychology kind of developed as well. So I never had this intention really from leaving school in year 12 to become a psychologist. I kind of weighed up my options and thought, psychology was something that appears interesting. I don't know much about it. We'll give it a go. And as I progressed, I learned more about the field. And then after graduating, learning about the different job opportunities, I've just been trying to maximize all the different roles that were available. Yeah, and I'm really enjoying my current role. It's different to what I've done previously. I've done a lot of risk management type roles with Queensland Health and Queensland Corrective Services and even Department of Defence. So to do a role that's more therapeutic oriented has been a nice change.
You said sort of you came into psychology not really knowing 100% if that was what you wanted to do. Was there an experience or something that sort of you can remember as solidifying your interest in it and sort of giving you that direction to proceed?
It was kind of one of those careers, I think, where I saw that I could achieve both personal and professional benefits from it. So, learning about psychology, you inevitably learn about yourself and your own psychology and that of others, of course. And it's also one of those careers that you get to see, there's a potential to see positive change in people's lives. So honestly, just a gradual development. The more I learned about psychology and particularly neuroscience, I found that really fascinating, like that there's this whole biological basis to our behavior and that, we have a choice in how we want to live our lives and how we can change our trajectory in lives. It was really empowering. So actually the study just of psychology itself really motivated me to want to learn more. And also my practice as a psychologist after my 4 years of study was really informative and wow, okay, it's not just, you don't just have to be a therapist, so to speak.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what your role involves and maybe even on a day-to-day basis, sort of what that looks like for you?
So I might break it down in terms of, what a typical week looks like. On a Monday morning, waking up relatively early, around the 4:30, 4:45 mark to get to the plane by 6 o'clock. And as I said, I work in both Cooktown and Weipa clusters. And yes, fly out takes about an hour to 2 hours. And we land community, unpack our bags, get our calendars ready, whatever we have on for today, and start seeing people. And that's kind of generally the flow throughout the week. I also go to different communities. So when I say clusters, I mean when I'm in Weipa, for example, I'll also go to a place called Napranum and Mapoon. And then, yeah, towards the end of the week, usually on a Thursday. So it's actually a 4-day week because we work longer hours during the week, and we fly out on a Thursday in the mid-afternoon, late afternoon, and yeah, get back into Cairns, at least for myself. And also, I should say that in addition to it being client-facing work, doing therapy with people, it's also about mental health promotion and promoting the brand that is Royal Flying Doctors. So that's actually been a nice change to actually get out there and do some service delivery with community, connecting with other community organizations that are out there. It really increases your knowledge about what's available in these rural and remote areas. Yeah, it's just about, more broadly speaking, promoting mental health and making it less stigmatized.
Has there been anything that you've sort of learned as a good tip or tool of the trade to sort of do some of that destigmatizing and promotion of mental health in these regional and rural communities?
It's mostly about normalizing what might be going on for someone because, mental health is something that affects all of us. I mean, mental health is a spectrum. But one part of the spectrum that, is optimal mental health, and then you have a part of the spectrum that's deteriorating mental health. So for people that present to us, it's about validating their experience, being able to encourage them that done a great step in stepping up and wanting to try to talk with a therapist or talk about their issues at least, and that, at the end of the day, mental health isn't this airy-fairy concept so much anymore with what we know about neuroscience and things like that. There is a strong biological basis to it as well. So, it can be due to a whole host of factors across biological, psychological, social, and cultural spheres that impact our mental health. So just trying to normalize that experience for people.
I think that's such important knowledge for all of us, even us within the discipline that have that knowledge, but just sharing that with the community. And I am encouraged because I think that sort of is changing generationally, that we are talking about it more, because I remember sort of when I was younger that nobody would even mention anything, where it is completely normal and we need to discuss these things out in the open. So I think that's
Absolutely.
really important. Just to go back to sort of your work week, do you work in a team? Are you sort of on your own, or how much are you doing individually and with other
Mm.
members of who you work with?
Mm. So I'm fortunate enough in the communities that I work in that there's other clinicians that you can interact with. So I'm used to working in a team environment. Some of the more remote communities, for example, Kawanyama, there's only one clinician based on those areas, but that's also a very qualified clinicians that work there as well, as we all are, I like to think. But yes, we work in a team environment. We share the same accommodation usually as well. So we're very much in each other's space, which has been a different experience yet again from other roles. I mean, I haven't usually with my colleagues. Yeah, I might catch up with them in the past occasionally outside of work, but this is when you're seeing your colleagues pretty frequently, breakfast, dinner, and it's a very fun environment as well. I actually really enjoy working with the clinicians I do and very experienced and learning a lot. And we're made up of not just psychologists, we've also got mental health social workers, mental health occupational therapists, and also mental health nurses. And some people have been there, as long as 6 years, maybe even 10 years. Yeah, so it's a really multidisciplinary, cohesive team.
Do you have any advice for working in that interprofessional, multidisciplinary team?
Well, all my roles have involved that, and I've really just enjoyed learning about the training pathways that people have undergone because, psychology is one particular pathway. But I guess just being curious about these other professions and what got them into the field of mental health, because, for example, a nurse can go in so many different directions, yet some of the nurses I've met have chosen to go into mental health. And yeah, I guess just having a curiosity mindset, I think, an open-mindedness that, sometimes psychology isn't just a way of doing things or there's different ways of looking at a client's particular problem. So it gives you a lot to draw on from their experience.
I was also wondering if you might be able to speak to any particular skills or knowledge that you gained through your studies at JCU that you find really valuable in your current role.
Yeah, and for me, it's more of a mindset, curiosity mindset, or open-mindedness to learning, and especially lifelong learning. And this is something I really learned more and honed in on through my studies, through, like I said earlier, about the biological base of behavior, through learning about neuroplasticity. It was actually really empowering learning about that because you learn about these people that had all these different lesions to parts of their brain, or even experiencing seizures, yet they were able to recoup their whatever was lost development. And so for me, it's always like no matter how late or you start something, there's always something to learn, and there's always something to learn from other people. So for me, it's really just about being open-minded, and you really need that as a psychologist, as a clinician, when working with people from all different demographics, as I have, because people just have so many different ways of viewing things, and you need to be open to understanding them to build that rapport, especially. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I know that you also mentioned to me in the past that you were involved in the Navy. So I imagine that you've in the Navy, as well as these different roles, going to different communities, living in different places, that you've really had to figure out how to work with quite a variety of people. Would you say having that understanding of interpersonal relationships and interactions has been a benefit to just both your professional and personal life?
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes it can actually be a bit confronting, like through relating to other people and these interpersonal relations, whether it's clients or, like you mentioned, myself being in the Navy, which I should mention was a gap year in the Navy at the time. You meet people of from different places across Australia, even the world, and you learn a lot about yourself through relating to these people because you come to realize, oh, there's a lot more to life than, let's say, beyond far north Queensland. So for me, those were very informative experiences, and sometimes, there were personality clashes and there were challenges, and that bring out, different parts of yourself. And so I think it's just about trying to reflect on those experiences and think, okay, so this is how I responded in this situation, this way. Like, why was that? And fortunately enough, being a psychologist, there's lots of frameworks and tools to draw on to help in that reflection. Yes, certainly, you learn a lot about yourself and others through this work and just being a person in the world generally.
Do you have a, favorite framework or two that you tend to use in your sort of client-focused work?
I tend to draw on a bit of an eclectic approach, to be honest, when I do work with people. But I think the framework provided by something like eye movement desensitization reprocessing therapy or EMDR therapy is a really concise and beautiful framework. It focuses on the past, the present, and the future. This three-pronged protocol, and it takes you through a series of, I think, about 8 stages in order to process something like a traumatic memory. And I've spoken with other psychologists, and they've just stated that the structure associated with that particular therapy is something that also they get a lot of benefit from and their clients get benefit from. So if I was to focus on one particular framework that I've learned about, at least up until this stage, EMDR therapy is a really nice way of conducting therapy.
Hmm. And is that something that you find people are readily buying into, or how do you approach that with people who may not be familiar with that as an option?
Mm. I think it's certainly come a long way from where it was. I mean, it sounds like such a odd technique to be waving your fingers in front of someone's face, and then they have these emotional experiences that help them move past a memory, or at least lessen the emotional load associated with a memory. But for me, again, going back to that biological base of behavior, when I learned that there were studies done even on animal models utilizing the EMDR approach, you can research the papers that are out there on this because I can't necessarily quote them at this point in time, but that really was took me aback. I was like, wow, they've even found that a similar protocol, has worked on rat models, and then just going through, yeah, the cognitive psychology of it as well was really interesting. So I was like, oh, it's like now this is drawing on things I learned in my second year of psychology, and it's all coming back again in a therapeutic way. So it was so fascinating to have these links that I'd already learned. And it's like, oh, I might not use cognitive psychology or biological psychobiology, I should say, but here it is again popping up, and there's research and evidence base to support it. And now I think it's quite a well-supported therapy, especially for post-traumatic stress disorder.
And since you brought up your second year studies, reading the literature and having an evidence-based for what you are doing in your professional life. So I wondered if you might be able to just touch on your knowledge of research methods or data analysis and how that plays a role in your current profession.
One example that comes to mind the most, I think, is probably just having an awareness of statistics. Surprisingly, yeah, that was something when you're doing it at the time of study, you're like, why am I learning about this? How is this going to help me? And lo and behold, it does. It really does. For example, a lot of the disorders that we have in our Western society are based on the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. It's a mouthful. And a lot of those are based, as in the title suggests, on statistics, statistical knowledge that we have based on different demographics, how it affects how different disorders affect male, females, and what percentage of the general population have this experience. So having that understanding, I think, is really important when you're in an assessment phase and trying to understand a person's issues or experience. And certainly just the critical thinking is also like that, the scientific method of critical thinking and things like that is also very important. I think just to having an objective approach to people's problems and experience that they bring to you. And for example, when you're going through like a CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy, being objective about people's thoughts that's when I also note a scientific backing helps you a lot as well.
Interesting. So I have one more question for you, which is really if you could maybe reflect on a big issue that you see in your role and how might the students who are coming through and graduating, how they might play a role in addressing such an issue in the future.
I think it might actually boil down to the training pathways. I went through and did the 4+2 program, so did my 4 years of undergraduate study, including an honours degree. And then after taking a gap year, I pursued the +2 internship, which I did across 3 different workplaces, which was really good. So for me, it's or advice I could give around that is if psychology is something that you really want to achieve, that just to attempt to remain motivated as you can, and know that once you get through all the hoops and things like that, there's so many opportunities that open up, especially even if you just get your general registration, which is what I have. You don't necessarily have to focus straight on getting your clinical endorsement as a clinical psychologist and all these other titles like a PhD. There are lots of opportunities available, and our experience and knowledge is highly sought after. And a lot of people do seek out our experience and knowledge. So just to remain motivated on these different training pathways, if there's a will, there's a way. And if you understand your why, you will certainly have a fulfilling career.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful point to end on, is just understanding what motivates you and what you're interested in and thinking about the different pathways that are open to you. So Hayden, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been lovely to chat with you.
Awesome. Thank you. You too, Amanda.
Thanks for listening to Professionally Psyched. This podcast wouldn't be possible without the ongoing support of our Psych community. If you'd like to show your support, or if you want us to cover anything on the pod, reach out via our emails, and don't forget you can listen to full episodes on Spotify.